Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. Mike kind of already ruined it. All the costs are going up. You're going to spend a whole bunch of money. We'll see you later, right? That's not, there's going to be a little bit more to that. We are going to walk through a couple different components of Medicare. Again, just for educational purposes, we're going to show you some trends in the overall cost of healthcare so you can see that. But what we do at Nationwide in my group is we're out and we're trying to identify certain issues that clients have that the financial services world they're not addressing very well. And one of the biggest ones is, what's it going to cost for healthcare? It's very easy to go on the Medicare website and look for it, but what's it going to cost if you start today when you're 70, 75, and 80? But we're going to walk you through, and this is going to be our agenda. We're going to talk about the retirement income challenge. We're going to talk about, we're going to understand healthcare in general again. We're going to talk about Medicare. We're going to go through Part A, Part B, prescription drug, and supplement very briefly, so don't anybody run out of the room for that either. And then we're going to help you create a plan. So let's jump in and see and talk about the retirement income challenge. Okay? This is basically a roadmap starting at age 55, going all the way through to age 70. And what those are just different decisions that you might have to make, either you personally or with your advisor, starting at age 55, if you need to or want to access any of your deferred accounts, IRAs or 401ks. There's certain rules that allow you to take money out of those accounts and circumvent the penalties. Over there at 59 and a half, everyone is allowed to touch IRAs and 401ks if you need to for your retirement. Then we get to Social Security, 62, 66, or 70. Based on your individual situation, when am I going to actually start taking Social Security? Do I take it here? Do I defer it and let it go up more as far as my income? Or do I wait and maximize it at 70 based on your own individual situation? Then at age 70 and a half, if you didn't start over at 59 and a half taking money out of IRAs or 401ks, the IRS says, well, we've waited long enough, now we're going to need you to take it out because we need some taxes, right? So they ask you to pull money out of this. Now we've walked around everything around age 65. The reason, from 55 all the way through to 70, those are decisions that will create cash flow for you. Whether it's accessing your own accounts or depending on when you're going to take Social Security, it all creates money into your overall plan or your income cash flow, except for age 65. At age 65, when we look at Medicare and what are we going to do, how much are we going to spend, that is actually going to be, if not one, the second biggest expense over your lifetime in retirement. So the question I'll pose to you, if you're 65 now or older, you probably have a better idea of the answer than some of the folks do. But at 65, what would it cost a married couple in today's dollars to have Part A, Part B, a prescription drug plan, and then a supplemental plan behind that? So just get that number in your head and we're going to walk you through and show you one of the studies that we did. Here's the two big things that everybody's worrying about, the big risks with anything that you have in retirement accounts or IRAs or savings. The two biggest ones are market loss and inflation. If I am pre-retiree, where I'm not retired yet, and the market affects my account in a negative way, what do you have on your side? I don't mean Nationwide, that's not a joke. What do you have on your side if the market goes down and you're not retired yet? Correct. So if I'm not retired and the market goes down, I have the ability to wait it out because I'm not using those assets to fund what I want to do in retirement. I'm going to wait. Inflation the same way. If inflation starts going up, you have time to outpace it, let the assets keep growing so you can outpace inflation for when you actually need it in retirement. Here's the problem though. Remember how I said if the market goes down, you have time? When you're in retirement and you have assets and accounts that you're actually going to spend on yourself to fund whatever you want to do in retirement, and the market goes down, now all of a sudden you don't have time. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm not going to touch it anymore. I have my paycheck coming in because your paycheck's not coming in anymore, right? So the market loss, is amplified as far as a risk. Inflation, the same way. But now all of a sudden, we bring in new. The mentality changes once we hit retirement. If you look over there, I want to know, because I'm not working anymore, I want to know if I'm working with an advisor, how much money do I have today? How long do you expect me to be here? And do I have enough money to go through that expanse of time? So that they want to know, everyone wants to know, am I going to outlive my assets or not? Then, am I going to have adequate income if I'm not here for my spouse? Now the big one is, on the bottom, healthcare cost. Now we have to figure out, if you think about generations before, everybody worked somewhere for 30, 35 years, they had a pension check. They went into retirement, they had retirement benefits. So mom and dad, cousins and uncles from before, you know, basically when they retired, they were set. Now, unfortunately, it's different. The dilemma as far as the complexity of healthcare is not just complex for you folks and for us as advisors, it's complex for everyone. And to kind of get your head wrapped around the complexity of it or the magnitude of it, the US government, back in 2011, on what they call the big three, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, spent $1.5 trillion. Now, a lot of folks are like, that's a big number. Some folks say, I thought it was more. I'm more alarmed at the percent of the overall budget. 1.5 trillion meant 43% of the budget was spent on just those three. Now's when I tell you guys know how many folks are turning 65 every day? 10,000. It's the biggest boom of folks turning 65 between now and 2030. So if we're already at 43% of the overall budget, and we have more folks that are going to be eligible for Medicare, do you think the cost will be lower in the future or higher in the future? Going to be higher. But we need to know how much, and based on where you live, how much money you make, certain health issues, we're going to be able to pinpoint that better for you. Here's what, if we just look at overall healthcare versus inflation, the average annual inflation, meaning what I spent $1 on last year, has now gone up 2.6% just on goods and services. That's general inflation. Unfortunately, if I spent $1 on healthcare last year, that went up 8.3%. So it's moving faster than general inflation, so we need to make sure that it's part of the overall plan. Because if it's not part of the overall plan, what is going to happen to you as the retiree? We did a poll. This is the number one answer. Simply, if I'm taking dollars that I didn't know I had to spend that much on health care, and I have to pull from one pot to pay for the other over here, all of a sudden I'm going to have difficulty paying my bills. Next one is, I'm going to basically spend down all of my savings. If I have a pension but I have savings over here and my costs keep going up, I'm going to spend my money. Now what am I going to do? Unfortunately, borrow money. Now my folks live in Ohio. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Memorial Day weekend, we're driving to Ohio. We're moving them down 8 miles from my house. Not a bad thing. The kids love it. I'm a little nervous about it. But as they're going to go, my dad's on Medicare. My mom's eligible next year. So as they're going through retirement and their costs keep going up and things are not going to be affordable for them anymore and they can't sustain the lifestyle that they have, do you know what their plan B is? Me. We're here because costs go up. They can't afford to do the things they want to do. It's prohibitive. We want to make sure you don't have to worry about plan B, whether it's now, whether it's 10, 15 years from now. We don't want to worry about that. So we have, like Mike was saying, we have to get a number and have it in our overall budget if you're doing budgeting yourself, or our overall plan if you're doing planning with an advisor. I talked about the folks, the generation before us. I want to look back just to 1993. If you retired in 1993, the gray bar on the bottom says 40% of workers, when they retired, walked into retirement and had health care benefits. Now, if you move from 1993 all the way to 2011, now it's only 16% of folks who retire are offered to carry health care benefits by their employer because it's cost prohibitive for the employer. Scarier thing, some of the folks that had it back in 93, as we hear in the newspapers and we see on TV, a lot of companies are coming out and saying either you now have to pay for what we are paying for you, or we're going to raise what you are already paying. They're passing it on to the employees or retired employees because the costs are prohibitive. Okay? As we're going through, this is very informal, by the way. These are all kind of the numbers and stuff. As we start going through things, and you have questions, throw your hand up. So I posed the question, husband and wife, going on Medicare now, having Part A, Part B, prescription drug plan, and supplemental, so complete coverage. We polled 625 folks, and we gave them a multiple choice answer. And we asked them, what do you think it would cost? 8% said over $10,000 a year for the couple. Then we moved down 13, 25, 12, 16. The biggest answer was, I just don't know. And I didn't know either before we started doing all of the different data that we have now. A lot of folks in the room probably didn't know. But here's the scary thing. These folks at least were honest. Some other folks just kind of guessed. So as you can see what that box says, these three right here, that's below what the cost would be. And we're going to show you, and we're going to break down the cost and show you what it's going to be. So if you underestimated it, you're in the majority. Our goal is to educate you enough to know what's down the path, make sure you plan enough for what's down the path, and make sure we can have not any surprises for you in the future. So let's talk about Medicare. How much do you think Medicare will cover as far as your health care? The myth is, a lot of folks think Medicare is going to cover all of my expenses. You're shaking your head already. I get this every time. Actually, it only covers about half. The reason it only covers about half is we start talking about out-of-pocket copays, prescription drugs, certain things that Medicare says in the past they were going to cover, they're not covering anymore. So if you have coverage, even if you have Medicare in the premium, you're still only going to cover about 51%. The next myth, does Medicare contain or cover you for long-term care? No, it does not. Very good. Majority of people are shaking their head. Medicare contains no long-term care. But people get confused when they know that someone that was on Medicare went into the hospital for a longer period of time. But the way Medicare works is you have 100 days, and Medicare monitors you. So if I go in week 1, they're going to monitor, talk to the nurses and doctors. Is he getting better? He's getting a little better. Week 2, is he getting better? Yes, he's progressing. Do we have a plan to get him better and get him home? If yes, and you progress through that plan, Medicare is going to be with you, but trying faster to get you home. Rehabilitative care. If we go through week 1, not getting better. Week 2, week 3, the plan's not responding, he's not responding. Can he get better? And they say no, they're done. Medicare says no more. Now you, as the individual, have to go to skilled nursing or a nursing home, and that becomes out of pocket. Okay? Pure nursing home care is not part of Medicare. That's a whole separate entity that you want to address separately than what Medicare does. Okay? Now, here's where the big number, the big scary number comes out. Mike alluded to it. Here's $250,000 to $430,000 for a couple. So if we're single, we'll cut this in half. So $250,000 to $430,000 for a couple to have Medicare throughout their retirement. Here's my question. I personally cannot and do not. Is anybody going to write a check for this? You're not going to write a check at 65 and say, here, I'm going to prepay all my Medicare, right? Here's kind of how I equate it. I have 3 kids. My daughter, who's 8, when she was born at the hospital, we drive the car up to the front. The lady nurse comes out. She has to check to make sure I didn't put the car seat in backwards and everything and make sure it's right so I can take my daughter home. She then turns to me and she goes, Tim, I need you to write a check for $180,000 for the next 18 years of your daughter's life. Keep her. Can't do it. You can't do that, but if you look over years on what the cost is of raising children, it's astronomical, right? So take this number, and then we're going to break it down for you. We're going to look at what is it when I turn 65? What is it on an annual basis? I'm not denying the fact that over 20 to 25 years you might spend this much, but you don't need that much when you turn 65. This is a breakdown of how we get what you're actually paying for when we talk about the cost. This is for Medicare Part B and D for the premiums. This is out of pocket for prescription drugs, which is about a third. And this is the Medicare cost sharing provisions. And we'll walk you through those pieces as well. So let's understand Medicare in the different pieces that I keep mentioning, A, B, D for prescription drugs, and so on. Here is option 1 on what you choose as far as a path for Medicare. Again, A and B, here's your supplement, and then this is your prescription drug. So you add those independently to make your overall coverage. Or we have option 2. Medicare Advantage plans. That is more like a PPO HMO, where everything, all these pieces are under that umbrella already. That is where you step outside and you're dealing with, I don't want to say third party, but you're dealing with business entities and companies that sell insurance. If you have gone to the same doctor for 20 years, you turn 65, you like that Medicare Advantage plan and you sign up for it, but your doctor's not part of it, that's going to be a problem. Now you have to change doctors. You probably don't want to do that, right? There's nothing wrong with either one. You have great coverage on both sides. It's just that on that side is a business decision that affects the ongoing support that you would get. They can actually come out and say if the husband's older and he's on one Medicare Advantage plan and then 2 years later the wife says, I want to be on the same one, the company may say, we don't offer that anymore. So now you have husband on one plan, wife on another. Let's talk about Medicare Part A. Does anyone know how much Medicare, just Part A, when you sign up, how much does Medicare Part A cost? Trick. Hold that answer. Hold that answer. Hold on. It's a trick question. It's a trick question. A, when you sign up, actually costs $0. Okay? That's the only time you can say that my Medicare costs are $0, because when you sign up, you're stepping into the plan. So your hospitalization, skilled nursing facility. If you're in the hospital but you go home and you're getting better, home health care or hospice, unfortunately, Medicare will cover that. Part A, that's all falls under Part A. You don't have to pay anything for that. Unless, okay? Unless, you ready? If you have Medicare Part A and you have Medicare Part B and you don't have Blue Cross or anything else as your supplemental plan and you get sick and go in the hospital, you have a whopping deductible of $1,100. Now, how fast do you think you'll hit $1,100 going to the hospital?
You'll hit it the first tomorrow.
Right. If you come in on a gurney and you have to take a test, they're swiping it while you're laying there on the way back. I mean, they're going to get $1,100 on tests or x-rays or whatever. That has to come out of pocket. Unless you have a supplemental plan behind you, okay? That's where the supplemental plan steps in. If you're there over 60 days, it goes to a per day cost. Again, this is out of pocket. Now, is that my deductible for my whole year? No. Here's how it works. If I get sick today and I get out of the hospital next Monday, they start a clock and I have 60 days. If I get sick again or go in the hospital again within 60 days, I'm still under that deductible. If I go in at day 90 or day 120 after I've been discharged, that comes into effect again. And we all know people that have either been sick or someone has fallen, they go to the hospital, they get better, they come out, everything's fine, 6 months later they fall, it's the other hip, it's the other leg, whatever it might be. It happens. If it's not structured properly, A, B, supplemental to cover that, a lot of folks won't have a supplemental, they say I don't want to pay for it. Now you have that to look forward to, okay? Again, this is just the education part. I'm not trying to scare you, but it happens. So let's talk about the actual doctor visits, your annual monitoring for different tests every other couple years, every 5 years, any kind of outpatient services that you might have. This is Part B, and you were very, very close on your last answer, 109. Everyone doesn't pay the same amount for Part B, but everyone does pay a $147 deductible for Part B, and then you have the 20% co-pays as you're going through the different visits, so on and so forth. But if, this is the schedule, okay? If you're filing individually, your tax return, joint, this is the tax return, and then here's the breakdown. Majority of folks are at 104.90. If at any time as you're retired, if there's anything, the sale of a home, the sale of a business, an inheritance, anything that would make your adjusted gross income go up, if you're paying this amount 1 year, you could move to this or to this based on what you put on your tax return, okay? Again, just so everybody's aware. Most of the folks are falling in the 104.90. So the 104.90, which was really close to your answer of 109, that's per person, per month. Now, just to get your head wrapped around again, how healthcare costs are increasing, that 104.90 last year was $99.90. So that's 5% right there just in Part B on an increase. We talk about an 8% overall healthcare increase. So that's Part A. Part B. Now let's talk about prescription drug plan. Okay? There's two ways to have the prescription drug plan. As we talked about in Path 1 with the different pieces, it'll be a standalone prescription drug plan that you sign up for. Or through your Medicare Advantage plan, where it was all under HMO, PPO kind of umbrella type scenario, the prescription drug plan is already built in there. Everyone that has Medicare can get a prescription drug plan. So if you have a pre-existing disease, pre-existing condition, you can't be denied to go onto a drug plan. You just have to do a little homework as the client to figure out which drug plan that is offered is the best one for you. And there's calculators out there that you actually put in the different drugs that you take, and it will tell you which plan will best address that. Okay? Open enrollment. If you're turning 65, open enrollment for this year is October 15th to December the 5th. Now, if you're 65 and you're healthy and you don't think that you need a prescription drug plan and you choose not to sign up, and we turn 66 and so on until we get to age 70, and all of a sudden you get sick. And all of a sudden you say, well, I got to sign up now. They're going to let you sign up in that year during this enrollment period, but then they're going to go back and say, you know what? We asked you to sign up back at 65 and you didn't. Now you're 70, so there's a 5-year they're going to penalize you. So if you're going to pay for a prescription drug plan later, chances are it's going to be higher than what it is when you're 65, plus they're going to add an additional penalty, which is roughly 1% for every month that you did not choose to do it. All right, let's talk about, and this is probably the most technical this will get at all night. Everyone, as far as having prescription drug plan, pays out of pocket $325. Everybody will do the same thing for that. Medicare doesn't do anything yet. Then after $325, they do a split. Medicare will pick up 75%, the client is responsible for 25%. Up until we hit $2,970, let's just call it $3,000. You've paid $325 here. Your quarter of that is roughly $661. So we have total cost at $3,000. You've roughly paid out $1,000. Then what happens? The donut hole. 100%. Medicare steps back and says, now it's all on you. We don't do a split. We're not going to do anything. You spent $1,000 here. We're not going to put any coverage back out to you until you spend $3,764 additional dollars out of pocket. Okay? Now I know a lot of people, and I hope no one goes through this in this room, but for every time we do this, we get different people that say, well, I have so-and-so. There's a lady that works for Nationwide. We did this in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Her husband hits through this to the other side by August every year. So that means they're paying $4,750 just for his prescription drugs in the first 8 months of a year. A lot of people don't plan on that when they're in retirement. That's a lot of money going out of one that's supposed to go for something else. And remember I told you taking it from one pot and putting it to another? They didn't plan on that. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. That's just the plan.
Supplemental insurance, like my Blue Cross, would pay a portion of this? They won't.
Supplemental doesn't cover prescription drugs. Okay? Now you can have a prescription drug plan that what it's going to do, it's going to start defraying the cost. So if you're paying just straight pharmaceutical prices, you're going to go through this thing no problem at all. But once you get a drug plan and we start talking about generics and we start talking about copays and what's coming out of pocket, we're not moving up this as fast. You know, we're not spending. So if it costs $100, but my cost is only, my out of pocket's only $10, I'm not going up at $100 a clip. I'm only moving up at $10 a clip. So that's why you still want to use the drug plan, because you don't have to put as much out of pocket and keeps you from hitting here. Now I will say on the Affordable Care Act, this is scheduled to go from 100% all the way down to 0 by 2020. They're going to start reducing it, meaning you don't have to spend that much to get to the other side. Because once you get to the other side, they step back in at a 95% Medicare coverage, 5% you. Remember how I told you that right now it's over those three programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, 43% of the budget, they're not covering any of that right now. So do you think out of the kindness of their heart, they're just going to absorb that and say, well, we got it? They can't. So probably, unfortunately, you're going to see this schedule change a little bit on what the client has to pay on the splits or the deductible. Remember we put the chart up on 10,000 or more, $699 to $999, so on and so forth. Let's break down what the actual cost is. Part A, only time you can say it, costs how much? Correct. So that's 0. Medicare Part B, we're going to use the bracket at $104.90. Part D, average annual prescription drug across the country is $30. Now, Medigap means the supplemental insurance. I told you there's two popular ones, C and F. We use, for this illustration purposes, C. C and F are the most popular because they cover the most after A and B. That runs nationally about $178 per month per person. So if you look at it, it doesn't look too ominous. But remember, that's per month. So we go per person, per couple, per year. Okay? Now that's for A, B, prescription drug, and then supplement behind it. That's just for coverage. We haven't talked about any out-of-pocket for anything else. Prescription drugs or anything that Medicare may not cover. So this is what it costs to actually have. Now, I will say, with the Plan C and a prescription drug plan, it's excellent coverage. It is. We just want to make sure everybody understands what this is going to be. So then this is the number, and then that's the number that's going to start growing. Okay? Little different highlights on Medicare. Enrollment, again, automatically, if you're already taking Social Security, you're automatically going to get enrolled into Medicare. They're going to already do that for you. Everyone else, you have a 7-month enrollment period. You can start 3 months before the month of your birthday, and then 3 months up to 3 months after. Resources. If you want to learn more about Medicare, the Medicare website, believe it or not, is fantastic. So it's www.medicare.gov. When you go onto the website, there's a link on there that says Medicare and You 2013. That's the handbook. Anyone turning 65 this year, if you haven't got yours yet, you can order one. If you want to look at it, what it is today, because you're going to turn next year or the year after, they'll send you a handbook. If you're tech people, you can download it to your computer and have it as a file, put it on your iPad, whatever you want to do. But that's an excellent website. The phone number's not bad either. Just choose the time of when you call. Afternoons are usually worse than the mornings. You will hold for a little bit, but if you get someone on the phone, I'm on that phone number a lot for specific questions that we might have. You have to hold for a while, but once you get someone, they're very, very good. The other one, every state has an office in every county that will help you with Medicare. It's called the State Health Insurance Program. So there's a SHIP office. I think between myself and Mike, we can figure out where it is depending on where you live. They're a great resource to help you as well when you start looking at prescription drug plans or supplemental or whatever you might have. And the Social Security Administration, just because they work in conjunction with Medicare. Okay? So let's talk about creating a plan. So what if we were able to work with you and say, based on how old you are now, based on where you live, based on a couple medical questions as far as health history, we can go and say, even if you're not at Medicare age now, we can project what the costs are going to be. If you're already on Medicare, we can give you a guide of how it's going to look as far as it increases. Right now, Nationwide is the only one that has that. We do not even sell health insurance, Medicare Advantage plans, or prescription drug plans. We don't sell any of that. What we're bringing you tonight through Mike is just the ability to get a number, a projection on what Medicare is going to cost in order to get your head wrapped around let's look at how are we going to plan for this number that's now going to be part of my overall retirement.